You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics. I'm your host, Dmitri Vietze. I am the CEO and founder of Rock, Paper, Scissors, a music PR firm. Here at Music Tectonics, we go beneath the surface to understand all the interesting ways that the music industry is changing thanks to innovation and technology. We look at the seismic shifts. And in fact, we have identified several seismic shifts that we think are changing things in a huge way in the music industry. And we'd like to share one of those with you right now. And by we, I mean me and Tristra Newyear Yeager.
Hello.
Tristra's the writer-strategist at Rock, Paper, Scissors and a regular co-host of Music Tectonics, the podcast. And today, we're going to talk about music like fire. So there's been lots of talk about music like water. I was looking this up because we're going to call Music Like Water one of our seismic shifts as well at Music Tectonics. And the first citing I could see of it was David Bowie in the New York Times in 2002. They did a feature on him, and he used the phrase, and he also said, things are about to change so much, and you better enjoy it now. Right now, all you can do is play live. That's all there is. And he actually predicted that copyright would go away and that there'd be no value in recorded music. But Dave Kusek and Gerd Leonard put out a book, and they also talked about music like water. So we'll talk about that in various other blog posts and podcasts. But this is music like fire. The idea with music like water is it's like a utility. You pay a monthly fee and you get all access, and it kind of changes people's relationships with music as a result too. But the idea with music like fire is that music is contagious and it's going everywhere. It's spreading like wildfire.
And it can actually up the excitement level of a whole range of activities and products in a way that nothing else can. So it's more than just a minor enhancement. It can completely change the context and uses of different objects and different ways of learning and that kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah, like Tristra and I have talked about this on Music Tectonics before, that we think music as one of the first augmented reality experiences. If you go back pre-tech stuff, we're talking, what did you do? You gather around the fire and you make music, and you change your sense of reality with music, rhythm, melody, trance, and so forth. So it's not weird to us that music is now playing this role in augmented reality as capital augmented reality. But as digital recorded music has matured, music is showing up in more and more places, more experiences, different fields and industries, silos in the past that didn't really have music. Maybe it's because the recorded sound is so transferable in digital form. And maybe it's also just shifts in culture and society where people have access to the tools of listening to it, but also are just interested in having a soundtrack to a lot of different experiences, or using music in ways that couldn't be done before when you had to lug around a CD player or something.
It's interesting to think about music's presence in our lives as a soundtrack, as a soundtrack to our inner world, so to speak, and how in some ways we move from radio and people listening to radio in very intimate situations, like in your room at night or something like that, to wider, different, more portable versions of music like cassettes. And then you think about the Walkman and what a big change that was in the way we perceive our lived reality plus a musical soundtrack, and how you can completely shift the way you feel by listening to a different cassette. So for those of us of the Walkman, the first Walkman generation or second Walkman generations, you start to really understand how music can change your perception and improve your reality.
I think that's such a great point that I don't think gets talked about much in the music industry anymore. But people think about the mobile phone as mobile. Everyone talks about mobile, but the Walkman was really like, first the boombox. If you had big enough shoulders, you could bring the music with you. Obviously, there were other cassette players too, but the Walkman turned it into a a cultural phenomenon where people that became part of the way of life. It wasn't an exception. Oh, let's bring some music to the beach. It was like people were walking around the streets or riding the subways or whatever, going jogging. That's what I always picture, as people with their white socks pulled all the way up and their Walkman on.
Well, I just remember as a teenager just wandering for hours listening to the music that I had dubbed onto cassette. Sorry, major labels and rights holders.
Oh no, that's okay, because the cassette companies used to have to pay.
Oh, that's true. They paid a licensing fee.
A fee that
so it was all good. So I remember just walking around and being able to kind of center myself emotionally because I was moving and listening to music. And that really brings us into some of the topics that you wanted to discuss today, Dmitri.
Yeah. So we can talk about mobility and music like fire as a result of mobility. But what we sort of were thinking was thinking about where are the places in life where we're starting to see music pop up more and more to explore this idea as music like fire. It's good. It's kind of a good springboard for thinking about where music technology could go, where licensing and new uses of music could go as we watch this pattern continue to unfold. I think one of my real conscious thoughts about this as a revenue stream, as a music use, a licensing opportunity, was really in TV. I mean, we grew up with films where music played a role. Obviously, licensing was happening before I knew what licensing was. So I remember the movie Pretty in Pink was a big one for new waivers because of the music that was used there, and the Identity or the Breakfast Club, those movies.
Yes.
But I feel like I started to hear about TV and music, which increased the pace of sync and the use of music in film and TV with Beverly Hills 90210. Then the OC was a big one where indie rock was really getting exposed through mainstream television. And then as you move into the Netflix era, the TV show Weeds popped up with some really cool Latin rock and
even to take it back a step, I mean, I remember in the early internet era where a lot of the cable shows on channels like MTV and Nickelodeon, Comedy Central would license a lot of independent artists, thanks to sort of groundbreaking distribution at the time. But the distributors would sort of feed these independent artists to music supervisors and showrunners in a way that it made it normal to like not recognize a track from the radio or not know the artist who was playing on your cable show, but be like, oh, this is cool. And at the time, you couldn't really connect the dots the way you can now via the internet or Shazam, etc. But that was already a thing. I remember people getting licenses from my acquaintances and getting a little bit of money and a lot of glory.
I mean, just the fact that you brought up MTV and VH1 in terms of music like fire, that was you're right. That was a moment in itself. So I mentioned some earlier shows, but now like with Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, it seems like the whole culture of TV has changed. There's a lot more independently minded TV shows, and as a result, a lot more cultural diversity and musical perspectives. And just it seems like there's a lot of licensing and curation and curiosity and discovery happening through TV and of course, film as well. So, I mean, so the pace, I think, of this type of stuff is accelerating. I don't want to spend too much time on film and TV, but, if you look at shows like Silicon Valley or Insecure, Atlanta, Nashville, it goes on and on with these shows that music plays this new type of role. It's not just a soundtrack. It's not the background. It almost makes a point or it becomes a character.
That's a really good point. And I think part of it is because video streaming services have so much data and they're becoming in some ways very targeted and maybe not personalized but scenified, so they can really reach out to a particular group of people with a very specific aesthetic and get it and hit the nail on the head. So they know kind of how to manage that musical context really, really well because they do get so much information about their users, where before TV had to kind of strike the middle ground and kind of, it would be a very unusual decision to go totally left field. But for a lot of these peak TV dramas and or, exclusives for these over the top video streamers, it's fine to totally throw an oddball thing in there and see what happens. It's a different approach to using music and engaging audiences.
So one little statistic that I looked up in advance here, in the shift from 2013 to 2014, according to the RIAA report, I guess in 2015, sync was flat from 2013 to 2014. Then skipping ahead from their report last year, the shift from 2017 to 2018, it grew by 23%.
Wow.
Which is a pretty huge jump.
Yeah.
Now, sync is only a small portion of the music industry revenues. I think it's in the below 5% range of the total revenues. But it's still, I mean, that's still a significant bump, and it's just evidence that what we're saying is true, at least by one measure.
QED.
Anyway. Yeah, right. Yes. So another moment in time that's similar is seeing music in gaming. And the first thing that I remember seeing, and there's been music in video games from pretty much the beginning, but it was a specific type of music at one point. But Guitar Hero and Rock Band, I think, all of a sudden made this very clear connection between music and gaming.
Yeah, and that music could become a game, or there was a game to be found in music and in the joys of pretending you were making music or actually making music. And
we didn't even have this on our list, but the whole interaction with music, karaoke, is not that far off from those games either. So
absolutely, yeah.
So there's that whole world as well. So video gaming, I would say a next level interaction was Grand Theft Auto has radio stations built into the car, so you can actually choose your playlist. It's another type of almost like native interactivity within the game. It's like you're role playing as if you're playing Spotify.
I had no idea that you played GTA, Dmitri, but you learn something new about your CEO every day.
And well, while we're at it, Saints Row 2 lets you make mixtapes within the game as well. So there's this, again, it's like recreating some of these musical experiences in these fields, these spheres that you hadn't seen, didn't exist before. The FIFA game series have had artists like the Black Keys, Lord, Avicii have been featured within those games. So then you have these brand name artists that are in the mix as well, where that becomes part of the experience, almost like a virtual interaction, as opposed to going to a concert. Not that you're seeing a concert there, but that, it feels like they're part of that experience.
But you will see it. We have seen the first instance of actual concerts and festivals being held in games like Fortnite with Marshmello, and there's been a couple other little events here and there. So this is clearly a model that people would love to imitate because it was wildly successful, probably because it was the first, but it could become a thing because these games are so ridiculously popular, and at the same time, people are looking for novelty within these gaming environments and want to explore something new. So
I think they were saying 10 million virtual people stopped by that Marshmello concert in Fortnite. 10 million people in this virtual festival. And there was some great metrics that I read about in a Verge article. Marshmello saw 62,000 follower increase on Twitter, 5,200 growth on Twitch. So there were all sorts of results, that demonstrated that that's something people are going to try to probably repeat. And
the interesting thing, is, apropos Twitch, is if you think about really like popular Twitch stars like Ninja, he launched his own record label. So there's an intersection between music and the music and the gaming worlds that's not always, often people think of it as like gaming dominant, like the game model is the one that's going to rule the day. But also the music industry models are coming more and more into play for folks in the gaming and live streaming spaces. So, and not as well as, of course, musicians investing in esports. That's been like, it feels like every other week it's like some pop or hip hop mogul decides to put a bunch of money behind an esport league. So there's a lot of really interesting and unusual interactions that's just started to happen in the intersection of those spaces.
Right. And, since Twitch does have this relationship between both gaming and music, starting to see more and more interest from the music world in Twitch, obviously with licensing and potential revenue opportunities there. But also Twitch has artists who are performing live as well alongside these gamers. They've got their own performing arts and music channel in Twitch where you can see who happens to be doing live streams of concerts. And we had Karen Allen on our April 25th, 2019 episode that did a great job explaining on the Music Tectonics podcast how artists can use Twitch and what's unique about this live streaming experience that does have some gamification elements within the streams too. So there's other gaming things that are emerging too.
There's the brand new field of VR, which AR and VR feel like they're just ripe for all sorts of interesting, bizarre games and other activities and experiences that involve music. One that has been the most successful so far is the VR rhythm game Beat Saber. And the interesting thing, again, with the industry tie-in is individual artists can create packs within this game. So you can really go after, it's a way of engaging fans as well as having a really fun time. I haven't actually gotten a chance to play it, but it looks looks like something that would be pretty addictive. Kind of like, what was the, like Parappa the Rapper, or, one of those games where you really could get into it and get, or the Dance Dance Revolution, where you really get really actively into it because it's almost like a full body experience. So it can be those things. I think that the VR space is where we're going to see a lot of really fun, crazy attempts at just trying new things, because there's a lot of possibility there.
So another moment in time that more recently than any of the stuff we've started off with in each of these silos is when Turntable.fm was at its height. This was a web-based social platform where you could take on an avatar for dancing and showing up at a DJ concert, but the DJs were other users, usually people you knew. And so you could create a room and you could become a DJ. There were two ways to do it. You could either lock the DJ as you say, it's my room, I'm the DJ, or you can make it where people kind of queue up to be DJs. And it was very viral. Part of it was listening to music for free. This was before people were using Spotify to log into other listening apps. But the reason I bring it up is because I was working on StoryAmp, my music tech startup, at an accelerator called Sproutbox, and so there were other startups there. There were developers that we shared, and there were leadership in the room, and everyone was using Turntable. They were taking turns. We were listening to music together at a workplace. So this is the next category that I think of with music like fire, is people listening to music together in workplaces in ways that didn't exist before. You could turn on the radio at best usually. It didn't seem, we've always had CD players in the office and record players and things. So I remember at one point we had a 200 disc changer and we just loaded up and just keep listening. But Turntable was interesting to see that. Now we have Sonos, and there's even Sonos has blog posts about what's the etiquette of listening to music together at work. Like listening to each other and trying to add something to the queue based on what somebody else has played, and don't just skip somebody's tracks all the time.
Do not troll with the it depends on how playful your coworkers are. Though I have to admit, we also have vinyl in our office, so it's really fun for people to bring in examples from their record collection, old and new, and it's great to hear one coworker yell to the other, "Hey, could you turn it over?" So it's fun how the technology has actually brought older formats into new contexts and made it appropriate to say, have an LP at work and be like, I'm going to play you this.
Well, and since we have multiple Sonos speakers, we can group them together and we can actually listen to vinyl across different offices and things like that together. But Paul O'Brien from MediaTek Ventures commented on my LinkedIn post, because I did a little bit of crowdsourcing for some of the ideas for today's podcast, asking about what are interesting ways that music is getting used, new places, new uses of it. And he talked about following some of the research around co-working and collaborative playlists and some of the research being done about how that impacts office culture or productivity. I wasn't able to dig up a particular article, so I don't have any points to make about whether it does
it's a thing
does or doesn't increase. But again, it's the reason people are talking about it is because you can now do it in ways that you couldn't do before. This collaborative playlisting is a pretty intriguing thing. We actually have yoga in the office on Fridays, and I put on yoga playlists in the office while we're doing yoga. So
and if you have multi-generational offices, if you have people from different backgrounds, it can be a great way to both find what you have in common and to find new music. My younger colleagues have introduced me to stuff that I just hadn't bothered to listen to because I'm a curmudgeon, and I've introduced them to stuff that they hadn't heard about or had just heard about and hadn't had a chance to listen to. So it's an awesome way to bridge differences in the office and find out what you really have in common, and also what you don't have in common. But most of the time we have a peaceful and fun collaborative kind of vibe to our listening. So.
And Paul O'Brien also mentioned that the one thing that he mentioned was that Slack has a Spotify integration, which I just posted on our Slack. We haven't
dangerous.
used that.
It's
it
gonna
does
get
seem
dangerous.
a little dangerous because at least with Sonos, it has to be people who are clever enough to download the Sonos app. Once it's in Slack, it's going to be as sticky as Giphy.
Exactly, it's all over.
So anyway, just a couple of examples, but I'm sure we'll see more and more stuff emerging around workplaces. I may jump down to brand experiences because it's kind of related in a way, because in-venue, in-store music is a whole other category. And again, I see these sort of cultural pivot moments, and I remember recognizing that Starbucks was, not only became sticky for bringing back the whole idea of coffee house culture, cafe culture, but music was always a part of what they did. And in the early days, you'd see CDs on the counters, and they were very carefully curating. I don't know if they started a record label, whether they had a retail component where they were very carefully curating. It can make a huge difference. Labels and artists were pitching, getting into this kind of the Starbucks channel. And I was curious what's going on with Starbucks. So I looked it up, and now I guess the Starbucks Rewards app, you can see if you have location services turned on your phone, you can see what's playing in your Starbucks location at any given time. But it's just interesting to think about how that music has been such a strong part of their brand. And then you look at certain hotels like Soho House. Somebody is a curator for Soho House, or the Standard. Some of those places, they have curators for their hotel playlists. I mean, I'm sure everyone does now, but if you go into one of the Standard hotels, you often realize what a significant role that playlist plays and what your experience is like at that hotel.
And we were sharing an article earlier that pointed to a recent deal that sort of W Hotels announced, that the sort of boutique hotel chain announced that they have a record label. And I think that's a fascinating new development I've seen across a bunch of different, really varied brands. Like the most recent one was Build-A-Bear. I think Billboard just covered that deal. Build-A-Bear is
those of you who aren't parents, Build-A-Bear Workshop. You might see it in a shopping mall. It's where you go and you pick out the skin of the bear you want, and the stuffing you want, and the accessories, and you watch them build the teddy bear. And now they have a record label. Yeah,
I think this points to, again, this industry model that seems to not fit into the digital world, but actually has its place, whether we're talking about Ninja or Build-A-Bear, as sort of a curated channel where you kind of know what to expect. It's delivered in easy packages, and at the same time, it makes your brand identity way stickier. And that's one of the magic things about music, is that it does tend to be retained, and it's processed very differently from other kinds of information. And so it's not surprising that people are launching, or have music initiatives, even if a record label may seem a little far-fetched for some of these models. But I guess we'll just have to see how Build-A-Bear does. Who are they going to sign? That's what I want to know.
Well, we'll see if they last as long as Red Bull did with their music initiatives, which I think got, I don't know if they got shut down completely, but at least
they pulled the plug on it this year,
yeah.
Which is a shame, because so many emerging artists and so many other projects kind of spun off that. So they made a huge impact on certain genres and scenes, and it's kind of almost to the point where, and this is maybe why they pulled the plug, that the Red Bull brand became invisible, and the musical identities seem to kind of overwhelm it. So maybe that's one of the perils of these music initiatives, is the music itself can be stickier than your product.
Yeah. And so, obviously there have been brands that have been associating themselves with music and so forth. But when you look at the diversity of the types of brands, and the rate of increase, and the wildfire contagion of music with brands now, it seems like there's growth there as well. And it points to different locations. So we've talked about film and TV and gaming and workplaces and brands, and we could go on and on about brands, but we really want to just talk about all the different ways in which fire is music is expanding like fire into other places, and take something as banal as transportation. Uber did an integration with Pandora. I think before that they had done with Spotify. I think Spotify pulled out when Uber was having its controversies. But just the idea that from within your Uber app, you can control the music in the car of this driver. Here's this driver who owns this car driving you around.
Wow.
now you're going to change their music, which I don't blame you. I mean, I've been in some Uber cars where I'm like, you got to change the music or turn it off at least, But it's interesting to think about. We talked about mobility with Walkman and obviously smartphones and so forth, but there's also this other type of mobility, this experience of traveling in a car, and Apple Music recently announced that you could access the music streaming from Apple on American Airlines Wi-Fi for free soon. So another interesting location to, I remember when there were those listening lists within the console in your seat, and a little playlist inside the magazine, and people, we've, as a PR firm, we've pitched trying to get artists onto those as well. But it's interesting now that that Apple Music streaming carries on to American Airlines as well. And Spotify also announced that it was testing something called Car Thing, which is a car smart assistant as well. So just interesting to see music. Obviously with transportation, with cars, radio's been there forever, and obviously cassettes and CDs and 8 tracks.
Wow. But now with the advent of voice search, with a lot of, we're not at self-driving cars yet, but a lot of the driving tasks are being automated slowly but surely. And I'm sure we're going to see more and more cars that maybe aren't self-driving but require less intensive driver attention. And so music is perfect for that scenario where you can't really watch a television show while you're driving a car, but you can have a more engaged listening experience and yell at your phone or your car that you want to listen not to that song but to that song, or I want something more upbeat. Or it's going to be really, really interesting as contextual search, as voice search matures, how in auto entertainment, in-car entertainment becomes much more rich.
I also think you pulled out the self-driving car. It's going to happen at some point. It's bound to happen. There's going to be some change in how people get around, and there's a good chance that people aren't going to be focused on the windshield. And it'd be curious, it would be good to be thinking about how music engagement will change once people get their eyeballs back. And
some of us haven't been paying attention to the road for years.
That's true. I always wonder what the the laws about texting and calling and so forth. You're allowed to eat a burger while you drive,
or have a child in the back seat. For again, sorry for those of you who aren't parents.
They're strapped in though.
Yeah.
So we got transportation. How about health? I had posted something on my Facebook page about health specifically because I was curious what kind of music uses people are seeing coming out of that. And the first one that came up was from somebody in the birthing world saying music therapy in the NICU, neo-intensive care unit. I've seen it stabilize really sick babies. Also, the music therapists create original music pieces incorporating recordings of babies' heartbeats for parents. It's beautiful.
That is really, really amazing. And they've done. I think they have. There's been a lot of research into music and its effect on healing, and its effect on just basically our physiology. And it when done right, it can be very, very positive and contribute to better healthcare outcomes. So it's cool to hear about little preemies getting to hear their first beats.
And Brian Mansfield, who we know from his USA Today music critic writing days, wrote about music therapy for Alzheimer's patients, which uses the music of their youth to reconnect with rarely tapped memory centers. There used to be an organization called Music and Memory that helped nursing homes with programs. Not sure what's happened to those programs since it's folded. Using that concept, I created my last great memory with my grandmother, playing her big band music from the 30s and 40s as we drove through the countryside in a convertible. It was the first time
Awesome.
in years that I saw the woman I remembered.
Aww.
And then he and others also mentioned this documentary called Alive Inside that tells, I think, the story of the way music is used with Alzheimer's. And somebody else brought up there's a Parkinson's choir for those suffering from Parkinson's disease that also is playing a role there.
And it's also at end-of-life care. Music is often used in hospice to both not just for the patient who is preparing for death, but also to soothe family and bring everyone together and create those moments, much like with memory care.
And we actually got a ton of health things Luann Williams from Austin, Texas, many of you know from the music tech world, pointed out a company called Lucid that has these multi-sensory wellness stations. So you know, to help with anxiety and stress, you actually sit in this station and it gives you, I think, both light and music and sound,
Nice.
multi-sensory. Our friend David Dax, great Canadian music journalist and DJ, pointed out something called adaptive use musical instruments and also a virtual music instrument, bringing more accessibility for people to experience the making of music and interacting with music for therapeutic reasons as well. You know, we could get into music for sleep and meditation, obviously, as well. So anyway, I think the health center is a key one for the growth of music like fire, which is not that far off from education. Obviously, music classes are not anything new, but using music to teach things other than music is interesting. We came across a company called Study Tracks at Meetum a couple of years at the Meetum Lab, which used urban music, used the lyrics to teach math and science concepts. So instead of having to read a textbook, you could actually just put on a song, learn the song, and then you get to learn the concepts and memorize them that way.
Yeah, I've heard of several initiatives that do something similar, but for coding for young people so that they can learn some principles of computer science via fun tracks. And that's, you know, it kind of goes back to the Schoolhouse Rock days, but I think there's a lot of projects that have gotten way more sophisticated. Not knocking Schoolhouse Rocks because they're really fun.
It was great.
You know, you can just, everyone knows about conjunctions who are of a certain age because of that. But I think there's a lot of different applications because again, you add music to a text and all of a sudden it gets lodged in your brain in a different way.
Another one more in this category of education is Mila, M-I-L-A, mila-learn.com. Matilda New, who some of you might know, brings over the music tech contingent from France, pointed this one out. And it's actually to help kids with learning disabilities, using music with some cognitive gaming, musical therapy, and help learn how to read and things like that too. So lots of cool, very sciencey applications when you look at the health realm. So we're talking about music like fire. We're talking about all the different places that music is going, and we haven't yet talked about fitness.
Well, fitness is such an interesting case because it's, you know, music has been incorporated into commercial fitness practices for quite some time, and just as with education, it's such an effective motivator, and it really transforms human performance. And yet it is. It's so interesting. I'm thinking back to the sort of the kerfluffle about Peloton. I mean, maybe it was the very serious dispute, about Peloton and their licensing, and they thought they had stuff licensed, and it didn't appear to be quite complete. And that I think has been one of the biggest stumbling blocks for a lot of fitness startups. So if you follow fitness apps or anything like that, a lot of them have trouble putting great music in there. So I think that's a really ripe space for, from a business perspective, for music industry to make much stronger inroads. I'm thinking back to Rumblefish, if some of you might recall that company, and it's now part of HFA. But at some point they had done a really cool deal that I thought would get, it was kind of flew under the radar, but they had with a sort of fitness company that had videos integrated into their equipment, into the hardware. They provided music and licensed music that went along with these videos. So you could imagine you're running in like this beautiful mountain setting instead of a weird smelling gym. It was really, really awesome. But so music is long, kind of, people have been weaving this in. There are licensing models, but it feels like this is a space where there needs to be a lot more conversation between the world of fitness and music.
Well, and through the social conversation, I did find a couple people recommended looking at feed.fm, which is basically kind of it looks to me like a B2B platform for powering music through other fitness apps. So if you have a fitness app, you can plug into feed.fm and get music that already has some ties to relevant curated playlists, but also to BPM and the types of exercise you'd be doing and so forth. So that looks like a really cool one. And of course, we didn't even talk about, we mentioned yoga earlier when we were talking about at the workplace, but in fitness as well, yoga and music have gone together for quite a while. And it's interesting if you go to yoga classes to see all the different methods that people use for curating or playing music. And I'm sure there's some monetization opportunities there by figuring out exactly all the nooks and crannies that this is happening. And I think, by adding value, I'm sure lots of instructors or schools would be glad to pay for it more than just a regular listener use of a streaming service. But, I've always pictured an app where you could put your yoga routine in and it would the pacing of it, and it would spit out what the right music was for your Shavasana or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. So an asana by asana playlist generator. There you go.
It probably exists. We'll hear about it. Tweet it to us, Music Tectonics. Internet of Things is interesting. Tristra, what the heck is this thing you found?
Speaking of fire, this is another recent deal that kind of caught my attention. McCormick Spices launched a grill that has an integrated DJing capacity. So my comment when I shared it with my colleagues was, "But is it licensed?" And I'm sure it's licensed. I hope it's licensed. But
we're talking about a barbecue grill.
It's a barbecue grill that will also allows you to play your favorite hits and DJ, I guess, while you flip your veggie burgers or whatever you're doing. So this was one of the weirdest uses of music I've seen so far, but I don't think, there always are outliers, but this sounds to me like, this could be hinting at a strange new future where we do have, there was,
well, actually, I was going to say, one that I don't think you and I talked about recently is it any different than those greeting cards that you open up and they start playing music?
There we go. Or the sort of the Reader's Digest, multi-record set where you could determine what you were having for dinner and what kind of ambiance you wanted, and it would help you choose what side of what record to play.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
so like the early playlist.
Exactly. So these things there's nothing new under the sun, and yet being able to sort of run your DJ set from your actual grill does feel like something new.
Yes. Well, and it puts music in a different place in a way. Sure, you could bring your player with you, but why not have it in your grill? I don't know. I don't want to be getting all up in your grill about it.
Exactly. I kind of, there's some point with the Internet of Things where you're like, do we really need to just have a conversation and stop here, everybody? Because maybe I don't need my refrigerator to be able to play my meditation music or anything like that.
Hey, my refrigerator has a photo slideshow of my kids on it. That's pretty cool. If it had music with it, that'd be okay. But my Sonos is playing in the background. And speaking of Sonos, they issued a lamp with IKEA.
There you go.
I think we may have talked about that on a previous episode. So there is a lamp that plays music.
It's good. Yeah. Inside you have your lamp. Outside your grill. You're set.
That's right. No, you're not. Because what about your plants? So we just came across MIDI Sprout, awesome company in LA that comes out of a kind of a DIY record label ethic that is using biofeedback from plants to make music. So we're talking about music is everywhere. This thing, they have an iPhone version, and you can, with an app, you can attach this device to your iPhone. You attach this kind of wire. It's almost like a lie detection test that you attach to your plant. Electrode of some sort that gets biofeedback from the plant and then triggers MIDIs, which then impacts or influences musical composition.
So we could find plants that naturally generate different genres. Maybe we can find a heavy metal, I don't know what kind of heavy metal plant, or what is a succulent more of? Is it more country? Is it more R&B? We gotta find. There's a lot to explore here.
Yeah, there is, but also it does connect you to these more natural rhythms that we might not even comprehend or be able to put words to. But there it is,
and they affect us. If you've ever moved someone from a room full of, even like say you go from a room full of cacti to a room full of more tropical plants, you may notice something different.
Another category that we're not going to explore really in depth food and music obviously go together. I don't know what the new applications, apps, or platforms or hardware, whatever is there, besides the barbecue grill, of course. But, one of the comments on, I can't remember, this LinkedIn or Facebook, somebody talked about, there's been research that shows how you taste food is different depending on what sounds you're hearing, what music, and how you create an auditory experience in a restaurant or eating facility of some sort.
And I did stumble across a recent report of a company that claimed they could use AR, augmented reality, to change the way you taste things. So either they could stimulate a taste experience, or they could enhance or shift a taste experience using AR. So maybe I would imagine sound is somehow involved in that, but I'm not sure. But yeah.
If you're listening to this podcast and you like to think about these things like music like water, music like fire, music is more global than ever, these seismic shifts that we've been talking about, you should connect with me on LinkedIn and Facebook so that when I post something about this, you can add to the conversation. My name's really hard to spell. Dmitri is Dmitri, and Vietze is Vietze. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, wherever, and let's be friends and let's have this conversation. Obviously, we're having fun with this, but we also know some of these things are serious issues too, and we're not making fun of it when we're having fun with it. We're just interested in stepping back and looking at what are these patterns that are emerging, what are these tectonic shifts that are influencing where the music industry is going. So if we forgot anything, you can hit us up on social media. Music Tectonics is also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And we are doing a conference October 28th and 29th, 2019 in Los Angeles. And these are the types of concepts we talk about, but we also bring it very practical. There will be sessions about licensing, about getting investment for startups, how to join an accelerator, things about how to go global with your music, the importance of transparency. We'll be talking about the Music Modernization Act. We'll be talking about new marketing tools for record labels and artists. So please come out to Music Tectonics. You can find out about it on musictectonics.com. If you sign up for our newsletter, you get a $50 discount off the badge. The badge is $349. It's going to be a packed day with lots of great stuff, plus some stuff the day before. And if you show interest in the Facebook event page, we're about to launch a flash sale. It's only going to last for about 48 hours. So when you listen to this, you need to show that you're interested on the Facebook event page, and that's where we're going to give you a special discount code for an even better discount. So, Tristra, this has been fun.
Absolutely.
Music is like fire.
Yes.
See? Tristra said it. Thanks so much for listening to Music Tectonics. Please hit subscribe on your podcast listening app and spread the word, post this, share this, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. See ya.
Bye.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.